Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So, there's been a lot of discussion this year when it comes to acquisitions and regulations. Specifically, most of this has been directed towards the Microsoft Activision Blizzard buyout. However, now all of a sudden there seems to be some questions surrounding Sony as well and some of the things that they have been doing. So we'll talk about that one a little later on in the video, and also a big game that could be revealed here soon. And this actually might be bigger than just a singular announcement. So we'll kind of talk about that one in a little bit as well. Per usual though, if you do find yourself enjoying the video, go and hit that like button below, and while you're at it, go and hit that bell notification and subscribe button as well. That way you can keep up to date with all the latest gaming news, as I do try to cover as much as I possibly can, Monday through Friday every single week. Beyond that though, let's just go and get right into the news, starting off with Halo Infinite and Season 2. Now with any type of free-to-play live service game, of course, they're going to be adding content over time, but with Xbox specifically, they have a lot of different IP. I mean, they have Bethesda, they have Ninja Theory, they have Obsidian Entertainment, and really the list just goes on and on. They have Fable and this, that, and the other. So there's a lot of different crossover that you could have within the Halo universe. And you know what? They decided to take advantage of that by adding the most important IP of all time from Microsoft over to Halo Infinite, and that would be none other than Clippy. Yes, Clippy's made its return into Halo Infinite, cementing itself as one of the greatest IP of all time. Now, sure, you can say that Clippy hasn't done much since the 1990s, but you can say the same thing about the Dallas Cowboys. They haven't been doing much either, but we still talk about them all the time, and that's how I view Clippy. Clippy has that mind share, and now he's going to bring that popularity over to Halo Infinite, boosting it even further. Who needs Doomslayer when you have Clippy? And that's one thing that I have noticed about Halo Infinite, is that we've got a little Killzone action here. I don't know if you all have noticed with some of the new armor. It does look a little Killzone-ish, but then you also have Clippy, so I think that this right here is what's going to catapult Halo Infinite to the next level. I mean, on one side you have the Halo Killer with the Helghast armor, but then also you can add Clippy as an emblem or a weapon charm to really make your Spartan a true superstar. But there you have it, the most important news of the day, and do keep in mind that Halo Infinite Season 2 is going on right now. Next up here, since we are talking about Xbox, let's go and talk about their cloud gaming initiative. We did talk a lot about this yesterday, as it sounds like they have a new device in development. If you did miss that video, make sure to go check that out. But something else popped up that kind of caught some attention as they were talking about their cloud games, and that was that their most popular game back in March was none other than Flight Simulator. Now, there's actually a really good reason for this, but let's actually first take a look at their statement made here, where they say that cloud-aware titles also extend to more intensive games, making it possible to play Gen 9 titles on Xbox One via the cloud. A great example of this is Microsoft Flight Simulator. It became available via cloud on March 1st, and quickly became the most played cloud game on phones, tablets, PCs, and consoles for the month of March. Players who otherwise wouldn't have access to Generation 9 titles now have the opportunity to jump in on the devices they own. And that right there is why this is just so interesting, because it does show one of the major benefits of cloud gaming. The thing about Flight Simulator is that obviously if you want that simulation aviation experience, then this is a great game. But beyond that, it's also absolutely gorgeous. It is actually one of the prettiest looking games on the market right now, but because of that, it's only available locally on the Xbox Series and PC. And that right there is where cloud gaming comes in. For people who don't have the Xbox Series, maybe they're still stuck on the Xbox One, you know, the Xbox Series X, it's still selling out to this day. Maybe you haven't had the chance to pick that up, or maybe right now you just don't have the money for it, or, you know, there's a lot of different reasons. But maybe you still have the Xbox One. And because this game is available through the cloud and you can play it on your Xbox One console, that is a major benefit. You can also play it on other mobile devices and PCs, so there's a lot of different options there, but I think that this was very telling on some of the advantages that cloud gaming has. Again, I've said this 100 times on the channel, it's never necessarily going to replace local hardware. I think for us hardcore gamers, we're always going to prefer playing on a local console, such as the Xbox Series X. But there's a lot of other situations where cloud gaming is useful, and I think that this here is one of those situations. Now, we are going to talk a little bit more about cloud gaming here in a little bit, but for the time being, big congrats to Microsoft and Asobo for the success here with Flight Simulator through the cloud. Let's go ahead and talk about PlayStation though, as some news did drop last night that has been drawing quite a bit of attention, and that is regarding the Bungie acquisition. Now, like I said earlier, there's been a lot of discussion on whether or not the Activision Blizzard acquisition will actually make it through regulations. You know, that's a massive megaton type of acquisition worth nearly $70 billion. So yeah, there's going to be some scrutiny and there's going to be a lot of questions about what's going to happen next. But Microsoft is not the only big organization that's throwing money around right now, as Sony, they've also acquired 8 studios since 2019, one of which would be Bungie, which they do have an intent to acquire for $3.6 billion. Now, that's not quite the same thing as the Activision Blizzard acquisition, as there's a pretty massive difference between the two, but $3.6 billion, that's still a lot of money, and because of that, it looks like the FTC, they're going to be taking a closer look at this acquisition as well. You can actually take a look over here where Josh Cisco posted this. Scoop: the FTC is diving deeper into the video game industry, opening a probe of Sony's $3.6 billion deal for Bungie, the studio behind first-person shooter Destiny. It follows the in-depth investigation of Microsoft's $69 billion deal for Activision Blizzard. So it does appear that the FTC, they're going to take a closer look at this acquisition as well. But the question then follows, is there actually anything to be concerned about? Is there a chance that this deal will somehow not go through? And my short answer to this is just simply no. I do not foresee any type of problem with this. It does appear that the FTC, they're being serious enough about things that they are cracking down on these acquisitions by taking a closer look at things, but is there actually any calls to stop the acquisition? And that's where I'm just going to say flat out no. I mean, I can understand them looking at it because it is a $3.6 billion deal. I know that that's not comparative to Activision Blizzard, but it is still like a lot of money. And whenever they see that come into their office and they're like, $3.6 billion, we might want to take a look at this because this could be a big portion of the game industry. So that's why they're probably going to look into this. But when it comes down to anti-competitive laws and all this, that, and the other, I mean, you're talking about a singular IP in Destiny, and they've already said that this game is going to continue to be multi-platform. In fact, they said that all of Bungie's games from this point forward will be multi-platform. So this acquisition here is not really changing the gaming landscape at all. Basically, Sony will get a bigger portion of the pie when it comes to Bungie games. Bungie will also be able to help out some of their other studios with live service games. That apparently is a big part of their plan, as Sony has like 10 plus live service games planned for the next couple of years. So that's a big deal for them as well. But beyond that, I mean, it doesn't really seem like anything is changing at all for the gaming landscape as a whole. Truthfully, based off of all the acquisitions that we've seen in recent years, this might actually be the strangest one that I can recall. Personally, if I was Xbox or Sony, I wouldn't have made a $3.6 billion acquisition for Bungie and the stipulations that came with that acquisition. But hey, you do what you have to do. I get it. But it is definitely a strange one, and no, I do not foresee any type of problems with this acquisition going forward. I imagine that they'll take a look at it and then just kind of pass it on and say, hey, you're good to go. That's kind of my prediction. Business per usual, and I'd almost kind of say that it was to be expected just because the price involved and everything that's happening right now. I'm sure with the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition, the FTC might be taking a closer look at the game industry. And on top of that, the FTC in general, they're just being a little bit more strict than what they used to be. So because of that and the price involved, I'm not necessarily overly surprised that they are taking a closer look at this. Now, with all of that said, and keep in mind that this is just speculation on my part, but the one thing that I could see this affecting is further acquisitions. What I mean by that is that with them currently going through regulations, and depending on how long that lasts, I wonder if this will keep them from maybe picking up other studios as of this moment. We take a look at Activision Blizzard. Once again, I know we're talking a lot about them, but I've said it before. I feel like with them trying to get through regulations, that's tied their hands a little bit on picking up other studios as well. Otherwise, I feel like the Crystal Dynamics buyout that we saw earlier this week come from Embracer Group, I feel like that story might have been very different if they weren't currently going through regulations with Activision Blizzard. If they were to pick up other studios while also going through regulations, I kind of wonder on whether or not that would raise some red flags. So this kind of applies to Sony as well. Again, they have acquired 8 studios since 2019, and they are publicly stating that they're still looking for some more. But with this going on here, I do kind of wonder if Sony Sony will just kind of slow down a little bit until this makes it past the FTC. Moving on, though, we do have a big game reveal to talk about that could actually lead to something much bigger, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, but this is for Final Fantasy XVI. The Final Fantasy XVI producer, in a near reincarnation and Final Fantasy XVI crossover livestream, actually talked about Final Fantasy XVI and what was happening with that game. He did reveal that they have a trailer finished for Final Fantasy XVI and that it would be released in the quote-unquote near future. He also talked a little bit about how they had some different delays due to various factors, and that the development team has spent a fairly long time polishing and debugging the game, and that it is almost complete. So this is all very, very good signs for Final Fantasy fans out there, myself included. I am stoked to see Final Fantasy XVI. This right now is actually one of my most anticipated unreleased games. But this is actually really interesting stuff because he did very specifically say that the Final Fantasy XVI trailer is finished and that it will be revealed soon. Now, that is interesting because what is happening right now? We do have the Summer Game Fest next month in June, and there's a lot of events being planned for that month. Right now, we do have the Summer Game Fest being planned for June 9th. Then we also have the Xbox Bethesda Showcase. That is June 12th. And I think I've pointed this out in almost every single video this week, but Jeff Keighley did state that there's other events for the month of June. They're all a part of the Summer Game Fest. Now we're just waiting to see who will be involved. And the thing about Final Fantasy XVI is that this is a big PlayStation game. This is one of their big upcoming exclusive titles, so wouldn't it be fitting for PlayStation to host their own event where they could show off some of their games, including Final Fantasy XVI? So that right there is where this could get really interesting because, again, we do have some events planned for June that we haven't heard about yet. I do believe that Nintendo will be one of those events. They have hosted their own Nintendo Direct right around E3 for a very, very long time. They don't have to do that, but they do that every single year. So I do expect them to be one of those unannounced events. But what about the possibility of Sony doing their own event as well? There's plenty of rumors going around about some of the games that they have in development. Of course, we do know about God of War Ragnarok, but we do not know the release date. We've been hearing rumors about games such as Sly Cooper. That's been in a rumor mill for quite a bit. And there's plenty more out there. So is it time for Sony to bring out their big event where they talk about some of these games, including Final Fantasy XVI? Now, this is just speculation. I certainly hope they do something in June, but there's no guarantee on that. Sony's been doing their own thing for the last couple of years, so they could very possibly wait an extra month. It could pop up in July, it could pop up in August, or maybe even September. It's hard to tell with Sony. And there's a couple of different possibilities here. If Final Fantasy XVI does show up in June, there's also a big possibility that it could show up at the main Summer Game Fest event on June 9th. So that is very possible as well, but nonetheless, as I keep saying, June is starting to shape up to be a very, very exciting month, and it does look like Final Fantasy XVI has a very good chance of showing up at one of those events, and whenever it does get revealed, there's also a chance we could get a release date for this game as well. Now, with them saying that it's almost finished, that means that there's a good chance that this game could release as early as late 2022, or maybe even early 2023. They, of course, are releasing Forspoken in October later this year, so with that being their big AAA release, I do wonder if they'll kind of wait to release in early 2023, but either way, it is sounding like Final Fantasy XVI is right around the corner. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, and as promised, we're going to talk a little bit more about Xbox Cloud Gaming, as I wanted to understand y'all's experience with this service. So I asked you all, if you've tried Xbox Cloud Gaming, how was your experience? And as you can see here, most of you all voted for just okay with 41%, then 17% of you all voted for great, then 9% of you all said it was terrible, and then 28% of you all said you've never tried it. So that is actually a pretty good turnout there that kind of echoes my experience as well. When I first tried Xbox Cloud Gaming a couple years ago, I thought it was a pretty decent overall experience. It did have some lag spikes every once in a while. Of course, you do need to use a 5G router. That is absolutely paramount. You do need that. But last night, I went ahead and tried it again. It's been a while since I've played a cloud game on my phone, so I went ahead and checked it out just to see how my experience is today. And once again, I would just kind of walk away and say it was okay. It was interesting because it does seem like it has improved. I experienced no lag spikes whatsoever, but in terms of its graphical fidelity, I would say that it's just okay. It's good for what it is, and I'm actually quite impressed with how well it performs. But at the same time, it's not necessarily going to take me away from my Xbox Series X console, as it does look much, much better on there, and I'd prefer to just play it that way. However, there are times I'm away from my console where maybe I just want to relax in bed, and that's times where, yeah, I could see myself playing a service like this. I really am impressed with what they've been able to achieve so far, but I hope to see them continue to improve that even more as we head into the future. Of course, they do have some big plans, as we talked about yesterday, but yeah, it does seem like most of you all seem to have had, at the very least, a decent experience with Xbox Cloud Gaming. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.